Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Messy Disciples. Thank you for joining us today. We are really excited to see you. Thanks for coming in. Me and Pastor Bob have really been trying to dig up some great stuff, and we've been really enjoying all the feedback that we've been getting from everybody. It's really given us some fuel to keep continuing to do this, and we're really thankful and happy that we're making a difference and that people are really digging what we're doing here. So Pastor Bob and I have had many conversations. Those of you that have seen it, I looked it up right now. We're at 21 videos, Pastor Bob.
Oh, man.
I know, it's great. And this is going to be 22, 23. I'm pretty geeked about it. And over these 21 videos that we've got up there, Pastor Bob and I have talked a lot over in just kind of staccato moments, in various topics that we've touched upon. And then we highlighted, I think, what was probably the opus was the Super Bowl video that we did, where we really touched upon what the role of the man is and how society, among other things, and including the Bible, have forced a specific, I don't know if that's the right word, Pastor Bob, but have forced a specific what on men. Fill in the blank.
Yeah. No, they've set a frame on men that has emasculated them and driven them out of a really key part of society and a part of the home, part of the life of the church. So yeah.
And so it's been that what Pastor Bob just encapsulated there that really I think is the birthplace of today's episode, and it's been a long time coming. Because we didn't really set out for this to be a topic. It really just kind of evolved because of all the different examples that we were finding and the things that we were talking about, and the span of topics that we were talking about is so broad, and it kept coming back to the role of the man, and I think it really helped to have today's guest in my network, Mr. Ryan Ermeling. Is a member of the faith community. He's got two daughters, one at high school, one at the academy. He's a phenomenal guy to play golf with. He's a great guy to get to know and have a great conversation about Christianity with. But more interestingly than that, Ryan actually put a Bible study together, and it was on this exact topic. It started with him telling me about this amazing movie that I watched. And he's like, hey, you got to watch this movie. It's called Courageous. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to look it up. So I did. I looked it up, and I'm like looking at it. It was kind of long. I'm like, I don't know when I can fit this in. It took me a little bit, and I finally fit it in. And then when I did, the movie really blew my mind. I'm like halfway into it. I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I'm like, who in the world produced this? I've never seen a Hollywood movie that actually talks good about men and talks good about, like, helps encourage and enthusiast, with to bring together what our actual purpose here on earth is. And Ryan was able to do that in this amazing Bible study. So it was a movie that was then tied to a series of books that we were able to read and go through. And there was some really, really good stuff in there, and stuff that I wished that I had been more exposed to as a younger man. So this video is dedicated to anybody that has a man or a young man in their lives. This is for you. So I'm really excited to introduce our very first guest to the Messy Disciples, Mr. Ryan Ermeling.
Could we also give him the title of Swami?
Say hello, Ryan, and take it away.
Thanks, Gio. Appreciate that. Good to be with you guys. And by the way, I have a third daughter that didn't make your introduction. I don't want to eliminate her from my family. So.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. You're right.
It's okay. It's okay. I've got one in college too. So just in case she happens to watch this, I don't want her to think I forgot about her.
I'm sorry I left you out.
No, it's all good. It's been great to get to know both you guys over the past few years. We came to Vegas a little bit less than 3 years ago, and have enjoyed building relationships with you and learning more about your stories as well. And Pastor Bob and I got some unique ways we intersect in the past through Camp Paloma and some other places, and Concordia.
Yeah.
And Gio, it's been awesome to get to know you and have you humble me on the golf course every time we play. No, I'm glad to be here and talk about more important stuff today. So these are the two books I think you mentioned, and I don't know if you put notes or anything out there, but one is this one's called Honor Begins at Home, and it's basically a Bible study based on the movie Courageous. And the other one that is one that I really encourage men to read is called The Resolution for Men. And it's an accompanying book. So it goes along hand in hand with kind of the courageous story. But yeah, I would encourage any man who has not watched Courageous to start by watching the movie. Don't look at the Rotten Tomatoes score first, though. It doesn't get great reviews from people who probably don't understand the true message and the importance of the movie. But it's a compelling movie, and it's basically, without giving it away, about a group of first responders, police, and some of the trials they go through, and how they look at reprioritizing their life and what they base those priorities on, which is namely the Word of God and the relationship with Jesus, and how that then transforms their relationship with those in their lives, their family, their friends, etc. So it's a powerful movie, and these books are, I mean, you can go on Amazon and get them or whatever, but The Resolution for Men is truly, and Gio, I think you read that as we went along the Bible study.
I did.
You can probably speak to that even more than I can. I mean, it's a pretty transformational book in terms of some of the ways it helps you to start to think about your role as a husband and a father, and as a friend to other men, right? So I think it's a must read for men. So yeah, I would encourage anybody and everybody to get that, and at some point too, hopefully we'll reboot the Courageous study, maybe do another round at Faith too, and it would be great to see some new faces go through that. But yeah, we can talk about anything in there. I don't know if there's any place you wanted to start, or if there were specific, I'll put you on the spot, Gio, as you went through that. I don't know, it's been a little bit, about a year now. I mean, are there things that you still recall from that, or things that were truly transformational in your life from going through that process?
Yeah, well, I'm actually going to just, tap this one over to Pastor Bob, because Pastor Bob and I have talked about this so many times, and I really would like to hear your first take on it before I jump in, Pastor Bob.
I think one of the things that we've been tracking, and by the way, that Courageous Bible study is, we'd love to have another round, because it was really powerful for the church, and Ryan, your leadership in there was really, really great. And so I just want to go on the record as saying it's the right kind of thing to be doing. And at the high school, they actually show Courageous. It's a part of their curriculum to show Courageous to the students, to the whole high school student body. So the whole faith network has really kind of embraced this call, and this call comes from something, Gio, you and I have really been trying to track, which is these whole conversations, all 21 episodes, have started because we were having Zoom conversations during everything that was going down during COVID, and we started to just notice the eruptions that were happening in society, and just started having conversations about those. And I think that those eruptions in society really revealed kind of a threefold kind of crisis that's occurring. And the crisis is in filial attachment. And this filial attachment problem has really been a problem in America for at least a decade. And what's the filial attachment problem? People are deprived of fathers, of the patrium, right? And those things are seen as toxic, and it creates this social dysfunction that we haven't seen in America on this scale before. And so we've talked about it in different ways. We've talked about it as the Ray Romano effect. We've talked about even the love or the idolizing of Satan.
Well, we saw that in in the video with the Super Bowl there. And, Ryan asked me, he said, what stood out to me, just, as the layman, to me, Ryan, and I tried to find my book for this, and I realized I ended up giving it to a guy who I thought could really use it. Yeah, which was great, but I had my notes in there and I forgot about it. But at the very beginning, the thing that really hit me, Ryan, at the very beginning of it, it was the statistics. It was the statistics that hit me that really said, and I can't remember off the top of my head, so I'll just paraphrase. You've got the book there. You could probably read them if you find them. I didn't give you a heads up. I'm sorry, I didn't know. I wouldn't have the book, but it was some ridiculous percentage. It was a super high percentage of people who grow up without a father figure, without a strong father figure in their life, are more likely to, and then there was this really long list, more likely to be arrested. Yeah, it's in the front of the book. It's in the front of I think it was the Courageous Study book or the Resolution book. Can't remember which one it was, but it was like the opening couple paragraphs of it, and it kept saying that you are more likely to have a difficult time in life, more likely to be arrested, more likely to not reach your financial goals, more likely to get divorced, more likely to, the list went on and on and on. And that really, really was a poignant part for me. And then when I started to really understand the connection, and Ryan, you said it perfectly, don't look at the Rotten Tomato scores for that movie, because most of the people they don't understand what it is. And they probably were looking for something else anyhow. But when you really do understand what this means, and Pastor Bob and Ryan, the reason I really wanted to put you two in this room today is because I'd like you to tell the audience some examples in the Bible where God has told us what we're supposed to be. And if it's okay with you, could we maybe segue into that? Because I really would like for the audience to see how impactful it is when you understand, and Pastor Bob says this all the time, you got to be in the Word. When you understand the Word and you're able to have meaningful conversations like this about it, then it can be applied. So maybe guys, could you jump in and tell us a couple of examples here? Where does it say this? Where does God say this?
Well, first, I want to give some information. I don't have the book in front of me, but I want to give some information and then give an example, because I think it is important for people to see that a lack of filial attachment, a lack of father, has. I mean, there's some science behind it, and it's ugly. And I certainly don't want to play into the world's move of toxic emasculation. But let's just look at some facts. 6 decades of social science has established that the most effective way to increase dysfunction is actually to increase fatherlessness. So there's a lot of data out there on this, and this is exactly what's happened in the United States for the past 2 generations. Almost 1 in 4 children today grow up without a father in a home. And so, but Gio, your dad was in the home, right? And
yes.
Ryan, your dad was in the home.
Yes.
But mine wasn't. So it's actually playing out in this dynamic in the room. The vast majority of incarcerated juveniles have grown up in a fatherless home. Teen and other mass murders almost invariably have filial rupture in their biographies. Absent fathers predict higher rates of truancy, psychiatric problems, criminality, promiscuity, drug use, rape, domestic violence, and other less than optimal outcomes. And then it leads to a very negative effect, which is this: fatherlessness leads to the search for father substitutes, which I like to call daddy placeholders, right? And I see this very clearly in the Bible in 2 spots. And Ryan, maybe you have more or you want to comment on these. And the first is the book of Judges. In the book of Judges, there's this cycle that happens when people estrange themselves from God, and then they start to disintegrate as a people, which leads to like an apostasy, not a full apostasy, but it just leads them to be faithless. And then God has to send a deliverer as a placeholder, as a father for the nation, to bring them back. And in the book of Judges, what we start to see is that the longer this cycle of fatherlessness and atheism goes on, the more terrifying and terrible it gets. And so the theme really of the book of Judges is everything goes from bad to worse. And why? It's because they forgot about God. They had a decentralization of the family, which led to the disintegration of society. And I think the second one would have to be in the books of Kings and Chronicles. We just see again and again and again, when you destroy the family, when you lose your faith, society disintegrates and goes right out of control. Um, does that does that make sense, or am I talking off topic, Gio?
No, I think you're spot on. I really want to hear what Ryan has to say.
Yeah, no, those are great examples. I think the Old Testament it's this, well, I guess all of mankind, but the Old Testament is this recurring cycle of people forgetting about God, right? Then he sends someone to kind of point them in the right direction, and they forget about him again. But I think too, the same thing happened a little bit in Joshua, right? And they had all these idols and gods that they'd kind of taken with them, and it gets to the point near the end of Joshua, the famous line that, I don't know, I have this up on a clock in my house. A lot of people have it, where it says, as for me and my family, we will serve the Lord, right? He kind of put it on there and said, hey, how are you running your family, right? Who's leading your family, and what are you putting that foundation on? And he challenged them. And so they responded to the challenge. And of course the cycle repeated itself. But I think there's so many examples. And I mean, it's not just an Old Testament thing. I mean, I was looking today, Ephesians 6:4 is a great verse. And the first word of that verse is critical in the context we're talking about today. Fathers, do not exasperate your children, right? Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. Paul wasn't talking to mothers there, right? He's saying fathers, right? He's calling it out, and there's a reason for that. So we see it throughout the Bible where families, and more specifically fathers, are called out to be the accountable ones for guiding and leading their families and building their families on a relationship with God, and not relationships with the idols. We talk about the idols and the gods of the Israelites. We've still got idols and gods today. They're just, maybe they look a little bit different, right? So it's the form maybe is a little bit different, but the idea is the exact same. I know, wouldn't you guys agree?
Yeah, and I really like how you bring out in Ephesians that it specifically calls out fathers, because I think what we've noticed in America since 1977. I mean, 77 was a great year because we got Star Wars, but like also in 1977, what came out was called the Coenby River Collective Statement, and it was like this statement of, um, we as a nation are going to intentionally feminize. And one of the things that they started to do is they started to only talk about mothers and children and families, and they always excluded the noun of fathers. And from 1977 to even today, I mean, if you go on to some politically hot websites, if you go to like the BLM website, it says, I'm going to read the quotation here, that we disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirements by supporting each other as extended families and villages, quote, that collectively care for one another, especially our children, to the degree that mothers, parents, and children are comfortable, end quote. And so what you notice from that quotation is there's no fathers mentioned anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And what people have done is they've created this surrogacy, these daddy placeholders, where it's going to be the gang, it's going to be the social active thing, it's going to be my chosen family, my internet family. And they're doing that because fathers are absent, fathers are being pushed away, all these kinds of things. So from 1977 all the way to today, we've had this phenomenon of, we're just not even going to talk about fathers anymore. And yet, if you read the foundation for Christianity, if you read the Bible, it explicitly calls fathers out, and it calls them to do their God-given vocation and to mirror a Christ-like home. So I think you're right. I think you're right on.
Yeah, guys, I think both of you here have hit on some pretty poignant marks. And really all I can think about, it keep going back in my head, is to that commercial from the Super Bowl,
Yeah.
Of Amazon, of all companies, to glorify
Yeah.
there's so many different things that we said, and then to do it also to Black couple who right now in this country are already going through their own trials and tribulations publicly, and things are changing supposedly for the better. But then for that almost to use that against the entire society, and the combination of that with just completely degrading the man. I mean, it was, the entire thing was about degrading the man. And so I think it's even more important that we're having this kind of a conversation, and letting people know that, you know what, there are others out there that don't subscribe to this, that do not run our lives the way that I don't know, the media portrays it, maybe, or the way that the media portrays it and then infects the populace, that are looking for somebody. I don't know. I mean, the ramifications of it, of course, are huge. So Ryan, maybe the next thing I want to know, and you did a really good job of doing this in the Bible study. In fact, a lot of the guys that were in that Bible study ended up talking about stuff like this outside. That's how I knew you really connected with them. But in both of you, Pastor Bob, where does it tell us what we're supposed to do? What's our role? What's the role of the man? What are we supposed to do? And how are we supposed to do it? Because I remember in the Bible study, Ryan, we were also talking about that God gives us power, that God gives us the ability, and instructs us to do certain things, one of which you already said, which is to instruct our children and to bring them up instead of strike them down and bring them down. What else?
Well, I mean, we've talked about the role of the father. I think the role of the husband is part of this equation too, right? And your relationship with your wife and how that models what Christ's relationship with us looks like to your kids, I think is critical, right? So I think that's a big part of this too. So you look at all the verses in the Bible that talk about the husband's role too, right? And treating your wife like Christ treats his bride, the church, right? That's a powerful ask, right? That none of us are ever going to perfectly fulfill. But I think it's that is, you talk about what God tells us to do. I mean, I think it starts with, how are you as a husband, right? What's your relationship with your wife look like? And is that right? Because if that's not right, I mean, not that you can't still have a good relationship with your kids, but there's a disconnect there, right? It's an entire familial unit. We can't really, I think, just isolate that relationship with your kids. Now, that's not to say that, and we'll talk. I'd love to talk about this a little bit more later about if you are somebody who's divorced, or it's not to say that God can't redeem mistakes you've made in the past, and you still can't have a right relationship with your kids if maybe something with your wife has gone off the rails. But I still think men have to focus first and foremost on, what's my relationship like? Well, first and foremost with God, but then with your spouse, with your wife. What does that look like? And how does that then flow into my relationship with my kids? So I think there's a lot of really important instruction to answer your question, Gio. And maybe Pastor Bob can tag on this too, but about how we as men are to treat our wives. That's an important part of the discussion too.
Yeah, for sure. And just because somebody has fatherlessness as well doesn't mean that they're going to do all of those ugly facts that social scientists have been doing for about 6 decades. But from the beginning of the Bible, God has created humanity to be in community in the same way that God is in community in Trinity. And so there's kind of this image of God kind of thing going on there. And so God looked around and saw that, the animals weren't good for the man, that they weren't going to be the other person for him. And so God created woman. And in that moment, he created the foundation for humanity, but he created the foundation in the Bible for society and for government and all those kinds of things. Starting with the Old Testament, the center of Jewish or Hebrew culture, the center of it is the family. It is not the government house, and it's not the church house. Like, the most fundamental building block is the home. And all of justice and righteousness and all those things begins first in the home. And then it moves into community, and then community to nation. And so Whereas we think that the government exists to keep all of us crazy people in line. In the Bible, God created the home, husband and wife and children, to be the fundamental building block. And God images his own creation and his own creativity and his own image and his own desires in the home, often calling himself a husband to Israel, his wife. Um, Jesus says, if you want to know God rightly, call him Father. And so if you're kind of looking at the Old Testament first, the family unit is the most foundational unit for understanding life completely. Like when people got married back in the Old Testament, they didn't go down to the courthouse. Families met together in a home, and if there was a dispute, it was more than likely taken care of in the home. And if it couldn't, then it happened in the community. It never shot up to the government right away.
Are you saying on the eighth day, God did not create the House of Representatives?
No, and I'm saying probably that's really funny. I'm saying something probably even more radical, which is God's not an American in that sense. You know what I mean? He's in America, but he's not American, which is wild. That's really clever. That's funny.
Hashtag on the eighth day.
On the eighth day. That's funny. My Easter sermon, I'm going to talk about the eighth day. But so that's really good. Shout out to Easter Sunday. The next place that goes is as the Old Testament people start interacting with a bunch of other people, different ways to live, they have to start defining themselves. They make rules for family. They have laws about how to treat one another. And then when you hit the New Testament, Jesus reorients the family back to the Father. And he is the Son, and we are the children. And so everything gets brought back down into the home level, which is why most early churches were called oikos, which is houses. Right. So he radically reorients it back to the biblical worldview. And then Paul, pick an epistle of Paul, and he's got advice for parents and husbands and wives.
Yeah.
The hardest but most profound being Ephesians, where he does ask husbands to love their wives as Christ loved the church. And if you need to know what that means, just read a gospel, and it's pretty radical. And that wives would submit to their husbands, which, ever since the feminist agenda has been going in America since the 1920s, going strong, has been, I ain't going to submit to no man. But in mutual submission, in mutual service, in sacrificial Christ-like love, we learn about the profoundness of God. And so when you take a father away, when you take a husband away, I'm not saying that there aren't instances when that might be the safe thing to do or something like that. But when that dynamic is ripped apart, it's any wonder that God's number one comparison for the destruction of his people is the destruction of a family. So if you read the prophets, it's adultery is idolatry, and it's the ripping away of God from his people is compared to a family being ripped apart. And so it's any wonder that that's the case. It doesn't mean that that there aren't instances when those things happen or must happen. It just means that's not a part of God's design. And if the situation can't be met with understanding, sacrificial love, commitment, forgiveness, it's going to be painful. And I think that that's the erosion that we're seeing in society. Does that make sense, Ryan? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I want to. Can I tack something onto that, Gio, or did you have another question?
No, absolutely. Go on.
Just the point you made, and also the one I made. I think one of the hesitation or concerns some men have is they've screwed up already, right? They've screwed up their past. They went through divorce, or felt like they've been an absentee dad, or they've cheated on their wife, or they've made big time mistakes and they're not sure what's the road back. That's great. You can talk about this all you want, but it doesn't apply to me because I've screwed up. And I think one of the cool things in this book that we read and studied, there's a whole chapter on how God can redeem that history, right? And the verse that I'm going to bring up here is 2 Corinthians 5. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old is gone, the new has come. So Christ makes us new people, right? So I want to make that clear for anyone who might be watching this, that it is never too late through the power of Christ and his presence in you. he's part of you, to change that story, right? And to see how he can work through you going forward. That doesn't mean that there might not still be residual damage or relationships that you have to struggle with, or real hurt that exists, right? But you can certainly, with the power of Christ, look to redeem some of those hurts and some of those things in your past, and start to create a new path forward. So I just want to make that clear. I mean, and I think even for the three of us, we all live in Christ-centered marriages and try to be the best dads we can, but we fail daily. Well, at least I do. I don't want to speak for you guys, but
No, and actually, this is a good point, and I'm going to stop on it because, see, one of the things, and this is, I can't remember the video off the top of my head, Pastor Bob, but we touch upon this point as well in one of our videos, and that is really I think it's when you explained what the original sin really is. I think understanding what original sin, and I'm not trying to sidetrack it, but on this point, Ryan, anybody that is or knows somebody who is feeling this way, like, hey, I've already made mistakes, none of this applies to me, I'm pretty much done. And then what that is right there, in my opinion, is not really understanding what Jesus was and what he did, because anybody that is having trouble with this, that's exactly what he did it for. That's exactly why Jesus is here. And if you are feeling like that this is exactly why you need to understand Jesus. So hit one of these guys up. Now, before we travel off of that too far, I Pastor Bob, you were just about to jump in with something to add on. So would you mind picking it up from there?
Yeah, no. I really appreciate that. And I think we're so used to seeing the disintegration of the home, the separation of people. The divorce rate is out of control. The fatherlessness rate is out of control. That even some people, Ryan, I think some people don't even hurt about it. Some people are like, who cares? Yeah. Some people are like, so what? Maybe family breakup is just a part of many people's kitchen wallpaper now.
Yeah, like, but isn't that, Pastor Bob, isn't that the whole purpose of Satan? Didn't we talk about this in the last video too?
Yeah.
Like, this is just another manifestation of what Satan is trying to do to everybody, trying to break us up, and it also, it smells a little bit about a conversation we had where we talked about some of the 7 deadly sins. Why are those the 7 deadly sins? Envy and gluttony and all these different things. Well, the same thing applies here, right?
Yep. And I think that even if you're apathetic about it, I think then you're denying the real living connection between a social breakup and family breakup that's really, really happening. So to kind of be laissez-faire about it is to, it's to allow the devil to have a foothold to get us to believe these lies. And so, yeah, I think the problem is so bad that people feel a sense of shame about it, so they hide from it, right, Ryan? And then I think the problem is so bad that some people actually, they just don't give a rip, and they don't see why we're talking about it. And our current culture, like millennials and Zoomers, actually think it's better that, I can choose my own family, I can choose my own identity, I can choose my own politic, I can choose my own religion, and I don't have to even gain any value from my family of origin or from the origin of our nation and its history. And they prize this kind of revisionism that they can do, picking and choosing, Well, and I think that's danger.
And therein lies what I think maybe is one of the roles of the father, is to kind of keep things in bounds here. And part of it, and I, Pastor Bob, I've said this, very much. Ryan, I've shared this with you too. I'm not the most knowledgeable guy. I'm not as knowledgeable in scripture as the two of you are, but and I think that could be part of the problem. Is there's guys out there like me that want to do better, that want to make this, but until I heard what you had presented, Ryan, I didn't know how. I didn't understand how it played in. I didn't get that God told me I need to be doing this. Yeah. This was my purpose. He made me a man for this reason, so that I could take these gifts that he's given me, this great wife that I have. And I 100% agree with you, Ryan. Once I understood what's going on, that right there, the way that you treat your wife, it has just like the tree behind me, has all of that reach into your kids' lives, the way that they become, the things that God blesses you with. And, you know, you're taking a gift that he gives us, right? He made woman for us, and he gives us a woman in real life that we can choose to respect and adore, or we could treat them badly. And look what happens when you treat them badly. Look what happens. And there's not enough men that get it. You know, there's still a ton of them. In fact, on my day-to-day, Pastor Bob, talking about what I didn't want to talk about before, on my day-to-day, I run into men that are cheating on their wives, or, you know, go to hookers or go to all this sorts of stuff. And they don't get it. They don't get the damage that they're doing. And more importantly, they don't get how they're feeding into what Satan wants. They want us to be that docile, feminist, you know, sitting down. But that's not what God made man for, is it, Ryan? Pastor
So
Bob.
the one word that comes to mind, and again, I think it's the last chapter of this courageous book, is legacy, right? Try to jump ahead to your deathbed, and if you're there and you try to look and reflect back in your life, you know, what do you want to leave behind? Do you want to leave behind a string of kind of haphazard relationships where it was all about me and what made me happy, and I didn't really care and I was apathetic, or do you want to leave behind a family, a structure, a wife, a kids that said, man, this guy, he put us first. We saw Christ in him. So I'll share this story. My mom passed away a couple months ago, and my dad, I took him to the hospital. Last time I got to see my mom, he dressed up. I picked him up at his house. He was all dressed up. I smelled cologne. And I just kind of looked at him funny. He's like, hey, this might be my last date with my wife. And in the hospital, he's the words he chose with her, and he's, you know, putting lotion on her face, and his tenderness. I was like, man, talk about a legacy that my dad's created that's going to hopefully live through me and in future generation. I think we're so short-sighted in our thinking, right? We're thinking about what makes me happy now, what's good for me now. And if we could just try to look at this eternal timeline, and realize what life is about, not only eternally, but also as generations on this earth that come, you know, our descendants, if you will, as they live out, what are they going to remember, and what kind of groundwork are we laying for them? I think it's so important to try to take a longer view of this, you know.
I really love that story. I remember you shared it with me via text. I think it's just so powerful. I think if you go to your deathbed and start to take stock, I think that can be very humbling, because I think one of the things that happens today is people start cutting themselves off from each other. Uh, people stop. People start canceling each other, I guess is the word that people use today. I think one of the problems that we have in society is we have a people deficit. We have a people deficit. People just aren't showing up anymore, and that loneliness and that isolation, I think, is starting to profoundly affect the world. And Geo, I think we've talked about in the past, not as a people deficit, but as a kindness deficit. And so think
Kindness
of
is,
how,
yeah.
yeah, think of how beautiful that story is, Ryan, of your dad and your mom. I mean, how kind is it that in that moment, he got all dressed up and he got his cologne on and he talked about his date with his beautiful wife. You know what I mean? And that's incredible.
It's a
Um,
great display in front of his children, even later in life. Like, look at you know, talking about legacy, talking about, you know, what kind of a memory, even in, you know, the last earthly moments, you know, together, he still displays this massive amount of love for his wife, and look at the impact that it has on kids. But, you know, before it gets too far, I wanted to say this. You know, I'm listening to you guys talking here, and I've been feeling this a lot lately, and I haven't said it, so this will be a great place for me to say it for the first time. But the kindness is 100% right on, and I believe that we should all be kind to each other, and I think that that would solve a really big majority of a lot of problems that we're having on earth right now. But then I started to really think about when I applied it to the litany of people in my life that I'm realizing right now are unfaithful to their wives. And I think it really is more that we as men, as a starting point, perhaps, especially men who are going outside the marriage to fill some kind of something, whatever that may be real or imagined, I think we as people need to be more thankful. I think that it starts and ends with being thankful for the things that God has given you. And if you are in a place where you are not able to be thankful, then you are being consumed by some of those sins. And gluttony is not just for food.
Right.
Gluttony is and can be for pretty much any topic. So if you're not being thankful, being present, we live in this world where it is terrible to not have at least as much as the next person.
Right.
If you have even the smallest amount, I see it in our children. They're riddled with it. Somebody comes to school with this, I got to have it. I need it. We're the same way. We're the same way as adults. And I think that the big key for men, at least so much is my personal experience right now, as we're talking in my life, applying the things that we're talking about here, I think a lot of these guys, a lot of us have forgotten to be thankful. Without God, we don't have anything. I don't have this awesome virtual background to come to you by. I don't have the ability to go out and make friends. I don't have nothing. And I think that maybe what do you guys think about that? I mean, you guys are more knowledgeable in scripture here than I am. How does this apply? And am I even close? Is this a good starting point for people that are saying this doesn't apply to me? Well, guess what? It does, because you're not being thankful for all of these things that you have, where you apparently feel abundance in a certain way. So you can pretty much just do whatever you want, but it doesn't happen that way. You got to be thankful.
What do you think, Ryan?
I love it. I mean, I'm looking at a little desk, whatever you call it, paperweight, etc. And it's a verse from Philippians 4:6. Pray first, don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank Him for all He has done. Right? We're told over and over in Scripture to be thankful. Paul especially loves that theme, right? And I think you're right, Gio. And to your credit, and I think I shared this with you before, but whenever I see you're, I mean, whether we've been on the golf course, you've just been looking around and said, man, I'm look at what God's given us. Look at this weather, look at these mountains, look at this view, or whatever it might be. There's been other things that you where you've talked about that gratitude as well. I think you've been a good example in that area, but I think you're right. I mean, I think if we're not focused on that gratitude and what God's doing in our lives, and I don't just mean for the material things, right? I mean, we got to look at the core of it. Who we are, where our future is because of what God's done for us. If we're not thankful for just that core essence, then our lives are going to be fueled by something else. And I think that's what you're getting at. So I'd love to hear Pastor Bob's thoughts on that too.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And then to also just to kind of press in a different direction is to also be thankful for the crosses that we bear as well. Mm-hmm. And so it's not just thanking God for the good that matches our good, but thanking God for the good that doesn't feel good. To thank God for the things that we can suffer with. So, for instance, thank God for your wife when she is on you and just almost forcing you to be the man that she needs you to be, and to thank God for that suffering, and to thank God for your kids when they're driving you nuts. I mean, because what would the absence of them feel like, to thank God for the sufferings that are placed on us in life, because Jesus actually never promises us riches and wealth and blessing. The only thing that he promises his followers is a cross and suffering. And the good news in the midst of that is that he asks us to bear the cross with thankfulness, but he never asks us to die on it. He'll die on it for us, which is actually kind of good news as well. So thankful for the good, but also thankful for that which is suffering and that which is that leads us to the cross. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. You mentioned bear your crosses. The toughest part of that verse for me, and I forget where exactly it's from in scripture,
Matthew, yeah.
but he says, bear your cross daily.
Yeah.
And follow me, right? It's not a, hey, every now and then you're going to have this struggle that you have to deal with. It's, hey, there's going to be a cross for you every day.
And there certainly is.
Think of all the things that you've prayed that God would deliver you from. And maybe the answer to the prayer is that God wanted you to actually pray a Thanksgiving prayer for those things instead of a deliverance prayer, you know? Because let's face it, being a husband and being a father and being a man, the best in men comes out through sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
The best in men comes out through sacrifice. There is no greater example of that than Christ himself. The worst in man comes out in selfishness.
Yeah, I think that's where we are right now, Pastor Bob. I think that in Ryan was saying it, and while you were saying it about idolatry, what was it?
Adultery is idolatry.
Yeah, and then I was thinking about idolatry, and it's funny because, you know, as you interpret idolatry, you always think of, you know, these abstracts, or us attaching this to something, you know, maybe even abstract but still maybe material, like money, right? Like that's something that we as humans, we can say, well, I'm, you know, idolizing money. It's something that was kind of tangible. But what I actually think is going on right now is I think we're idolizing ourselves.
Yeah, that's right.
I think that we are becoming this, we have this, or this, you know, transformation or metamorphosis through the society and through these different things that I still all think tie back to lack of being thankful for what you're given. And that's just a general misunderstanding of what's going on in life, period. I think that all of that goes back to me, the me, you know, the selfies and the TikTok and the this and the that. And it's all, you know, how many followers, how many people like what I'm doing. You know, what I woke up and I wiped my eye snot out of my eye. Holy shit, I just got, you know, 100,000 views, right? Like, you know, that, but what we're actually doing is idolizing ourselves, which I believe is also a sin, right?
Yeah.
What is that one called?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, I think that, you know, some things that we as men can do 100% is pick up those two books, guys, that Ryan, and if you're a woman watching this and you have somebody in your life that wants to be a better man, that needs to be a better man, that should be a better man, you know, that has the ability to be a better man, fill in the blank. I definitely suggest starting with the books. I definitely suggest watching the movie. And it's okay for it to hit you guys. It's okay when you watch that movie. There's some spots in there that will hit you because they're so real. They're so exactly what maybe you've been going through and struggling with, but never were able to put it into words or emotion. So I definitely suggest starting there. And if for women that are watching this, you know, make sure you pass this on. Pastor Bob and Ryan. Ryan, we didn't say anything about 7 Marches, but Ryan has a wonderful group that consults Christian organizations, and this is a lot of the kind of stuff that, you know, the Ryan deals with on an everyday basis. Ryan, we'll put some contact information for you down in the comments below. And as always, for me, myself, Pastor Bob, we're always interested in furthering the conversation. So either comment below or add some things in. But before we draw to close, guys, I'd like to bounce the ball back to each of you. Is there anything that we, you know, didn't touch on here today that you want to, or is there anything that maybe we left out, or is there anything that needs to be said that hasn't been said just yet? Guys, take it over.
Yeah, I've got 3 things. First, there's also, but you mentioned women. I know this is about men. There's also a resolution for women book as well. So if women are interested, there's something.
I did not know that.
But the other 2 things are, you know, one thing, just a practical thing to think about is this idea of as men, fathers of kids, is the idea of power versus influence. I've got a 19-year-old at one end of the spectrum, and I've got an 8-year-old at the end of the spectrum. I can exert power over my 8-year-old. My 19-year-old, I can't. It's all got to be through influence, right? But if you don't build that type of relationship with when they're young, that influence, that ability to influence them goes out the window. So it's so important, I think, to focus on your kids when they're young, even when you have power over them at that point, to still already being working on the influence. How are you winning their hearts, right? What are you doing to show them what kind of father you are, what kind of husband you are, where your heart is, how you love the Lord, how you sacrifice for them. Because later, as they get older and older, you're going to then have the ability to influence them in ways that you wouldn't otherwise. I think that the only other thing I wanted to mention is we haven't talked at all about accountability partners. And that, I think, is so important. There's very few things that are less important for a man who's trying to be godly, who's trying to be a good husband and father, than to have an accountability partner. And that's usually another man who's going through the same chapter of life. Could be somebody older, could be somebody who's mentoring them, but somebody that you can talk to and level with about those really raw struggles and challenges you're dealing with. And it's not the type of conversation where you run into them and say, hey, how was your day? Good. How was your day? Great. Hey, who do you think is going to win the game tonight? It's like, I went out with, for instance, played golf this weekend with one buddy who I consider an accountability partner. And I asked him halfway through the round, how's your marriage right now? And he leveled with me and he asked me how mine was. And you're getting deep into the issues and struggles and challenges that you have, and you're encouraging each other. And if you see somebody slipping, sometimes it's a little bit of tough love, but I think, find an accountability partner, pray that God puts somebody in your life that you can start to build that relationship with, because it's hard to do this on your own.
Ryan, I do want to say something about the second point that you just said there that we didn't say earlier, is how important, like you just said, your power and influence. Especially for the kids, you have to be the husband that you want your kids to look for. So if you have girls, you have to be the guy that they should be looking for to treat the mother well. And if you have boys, then you need to be the guy so that they can understand a woman that can recognize it, will then appreciate it in them. And that's a good way for them to find a good woman, is so it has that impact on both sides. And I think it is probably the biggest key. If things are not going well in your life, guys, then check yourselves. Start with yourselves, get right with God, get to know Jesus, and be a better honorer of your commitments. Pastor Bob, take us home.
I was just mesmerized by your quotation of check yourself before you wreck yourself. So really, that was great. But no, that's good. I think that my only encouragement would be to the men that are out there, or the women who are supporting men or sons or grandsons or what have you out there, is to remember that, men, you are the spiritual head of your house. And so attend to the things of God. Be in the word. Let your wife see you in the word. Let your kids see you in the word. Bring them to church. Attend to the things of God. Show them how a man believes. And then as you're raising your children, remember for them, their core identity is in Christ. And you've demonstrated that by being the spiritual head of your house. But also at the same time, you're not asking them to make you, as the dad or the husband, the core identity. You're not the only example to them, but you follow God, and as you follow God, you're teaching them that they put God first, and then they can see in you an example. The reason why you don't put yourself as the chief example is because one of the chief virtues that a father or a husband can do for a family is ask for forgiveness when you mess up. And to as a man, be humble and realize that you don't have to have it right, and you won't have it right. But sometimes the only thing right to do is to model your Christianity to your family by going to them and saying, like to your 7-year-old or your 8-year-old, hey, I shouted, I'm sorry, will you forgive me? And to humble yourself to an 8-year-old is to teach the 8-year-old something very profound about Christianity. And kids need that, and wives need that, and families need that.
And men need that.
Yeah, and men need that, because how many men walk away because either they're walking away because they're right, or they're walking away because they've always been told that they're wrong.
Right.
And so I think that would be my brotherly encouragement to men out there and to women, to love your men and to model what they need, and to model Christianity to them, to encourage them, to ask them to be the spiritual heads of the household, or if they're young men, to instill in them that need and that drive so that they can go the right way.
And the same applies to the women. You know, women got to treat their men well because the kids are watching. It sounds to me, guys, like we could maybe do a whole nother episode. I think there's so much that all of us could reach out on. I'm going to leave this one up to the audience. If you all feel like you want us to do another one of these, then please leave a comment. See what I did there, Pastor Bob? Leave a comment below, and let us know if you want us to keep going. If you want us to have Ryan back. Ryan, it was great having you. Thank you so much for coming out today and spending your time with the Messy Disciples. Please give Ryan a shout out. We'll put some contact information below if anybody wants to reach anybody here and know a little bit more about anything we're talking about. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here. Sayonara.
Thanks, Ryan.
You guys.
Thanks for watching today. It's been a great conversation. We'd love for you to be a part of the conversation, so go ahead and click subscribe. And if you hit the notification bar, it'll let you know when new videos are coming out, which is really important because all of our videos are about new and current events that are happening. If you have any questions, go ahead and contact me via email. It's great to have you a part of the conversation. Thanks for joining us. Bye.